the Office of International Programs International Symposium. I'd like to introduce two speakers today for our panel on what does the World Bank and CSU Extension have in common. First, Sonia Lynn, who's the Grant Management Coordinator at CSU Extension here at CSU. And secondly, Yulia Pushko, who's a Stakeholder Relations Advisor with the International Finance Cooperation, which is a member of the World Bank Group, who is joining us from the western part of Ukraine today. I just wanted to let everyone know the session is 50 minutes, and at the end, once the session ends, there'll be a link to a short survey that we'd love for you to fill out, but that's not for 50 minutes. So with that, let's turn it over to our panelists for this wonderful session. Thank you both to Sonia Lynn and to Yulia for being here today.
Well, absolutely. I just wanted to see if I can see the participants and know who we have as guests here. Do we have an opportunity to see that?
We could maybe have folks welcome and write their name and who they are in the chat, but we won't be able to see them in the webinar.
I see. Okay. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Sonia Lynn, and I have been working with CSU Extension for the past year and a half. And really, since I joined... Hello? Hello? And since I joined, the question of, as I came from Ukraine a year and a half ago, the question was how interesting, how CSU Extension does remind me of the World Bank, where I used to work for the past 14 years. And I do want to introduce my former colleague and friend, Yulia, who is joining us from Western Ukraine, as Sarah has mentioned. This is Yulia. Can you get online if you can, if possible? Can we see you? If you can introduce yourself and tell just a little bit about your line of work.
I actually turned on myself. My name is Yulia Pushko from the International Financial Corporation, working as a stakeholder relations officer. And currently we have while we were preparing to do it in the regular times in Kyiv office in IFC, we had a situation last week when we had to temporarily evacuate it, to be temporarily evacuated to the western part of Ukraine, to Lviv. I don't know if you heard the US president actually acknowledge the situation yesterday in his speech. So yeah, in this regard, I'm honored to be on this symposium, and would be happy to share a little bit of what World Bank Group is doing and what is development as we have it right now. See, because the questions of development sometimes connected with the temporary evacuation as well. So be happy to answer the questions or chat and join our discussion. Hope it will be productive. I am also would like to excuse if I can turn off the camera because I'm on my mobile communication now, so it might be better for the sound to be so it will be easier without freezing, etc. So I'm happy to be here and happy to join the discussion. So.
Thank you so very much, Yulia. If anybody has any questions about the objectives, the objectivity, and what actually is happening in Ukraine, please feel free to ask any questions at the moment, because this is a very unique opportunity, really, and we didn't plan this way, obviously. And the idea was when this whole international symposium was being planned in the fall, that was the very first thing that I did want to do, is to bring in this international experience, this international outreach. And very often when you do get to talk to people that are actually there, you do get a totally different understanding and the picture of what actually is really going on, and the objectivity. And we will talk about this more in terms of what is the work of development really is, and why the local presence is such an important element of just overall development world and agenda.
And then let me also, Sonia, reflect on with that we have such a wonderful, lots of people here and different background. I see that there is a chemistry, I see the engineering, computer engineer, mathematics, international studies program. It's just a very great, crowd, and I'm happy to discuss what is development and and how development can be on the bigger scale, and at the same time, it's like macroeconomics and microeconomics. What is more important? I think it's both. Yeah, you cannot work without. It's just a different angle. So happy to see all, and let's proceed with the presentation.
Perfect. Do we have any questions before we start from the participants? Okay. Don't see or hear anything, then I assume that we can proceed. Now, having said all of that, with this introduction, this is the idea, and this is the thought that I basically carried throughout the past year and a half, as to how interesting and how the university that we're here in western part of the United States, how is being part of the larger development agenda. We sometimes don't think about this when we're in education, when we are being a university. How do we fit into the overall development agenda? And this is what we are here to explore and try to hypothesize. In my hypothesis is that this is squarely part of the bigger agenda, and I'm very proud to be able to see this and further this in my line of work. So after having introduced us, I wanted for Yulia to take a moment, talk a little bit about the World Bank Group and what is it, and where are we starting from?
Yes, dear colleagues, what is the World Bank Group? I suppose there are some speakers and there are some, participants in our seminar from the international relations who know exactly what the World Bank is and what are we doing. I should say that it's the largest development organization, and so far there are 189 member countries, and this is the largest international organizations. We are part of the UN, United Nations. However, World Bank Group is taking, we have 5 additional institutions working for sustainable solutions. And basically, it's a bank, right? So the idea is to reduce the poverty and create shared prosperity. The main focus definitely is developing countries. If you're speaking about what is it all about, the mission of the World Bank Group, general mission, is to end poverty and to promote the prosperity, basically. So besides being one of the largest actually source of funding, there are basically the idea that a World Bank is the knowledge pool also for development countries. And there are 5 institutions that work for different levels, just to reduce the poverty and provide knowledge and sometimes access to finance, because we consider, for instance, I work for the International Finance Corporation, and okay, I'll give you the brief overview, very short. There is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development that works with the governments on the government level. Generally, it provides loans to the developing countries or the middle-income countries on the government level as a sort of the loans, secured loans or other loans. There is the International Development Association, the IDA, that works with the poorest countries and provides additional funding and different development programs specifically for the poorest regions. There is the International Finance Corporation, a member of this IFC group. So we work with the commercial sector, the private sector. The idea of IFC is to develop ways so the commercial private sector can be a leader in the development. So there is no government to government lending, but there is the sectors where the private sector can open, can refresh, can unlock the potential to the end users. And we'll talk about our experience in Ukraine, but maybe that will be later. So the basic idea of the World Bank is to provide both money and, which is actually more important, knowledge, how to access the money, whether it would be from the private sector or from the World Bank assistance loans and grants. And this is in a nutshell what is being done in over than 189 countries right now. So I'll stop here, and I'll add more if needed. Sonia, please let me know if there would be more information on what World Bank does and what are the major right now the trends and what is the biggest mission right now as we have it for the 2022. But I think we'll talk about this later.
We will. Yes, thank you so much, Julia. But I think the key thing is that when we talk about the World Bank Group, the very first thing that stands out is a bank. So when we talk about the development, maybe we have been a little bit conditioned, at least in my mind, thinking about the fact that development is actually all about the money. And the more money you put into something, the more developed of a situation that you will, end up with as a result. But that's not the case. As Yulia had said, a very huge piece of the engagement of the World Bank Group, of International Finance Corporation, has been in actually developing the markets. And the project that Yulia is implementing right now, and something that I worked on back in Ukraine, was putting together policies, putting together laws, and changing the behavior of people, of helping them save energy as they're heating their houses. And that's a lot of, it's not about the money, it's about changing behaviors, it's about information, it's about, and then the money comes in as a tying element, and we'll talk about that more, of course. And that's the whole, and this, when I became part of the Colorado State University, this really has opened my eyes, further extended that of understanding that development is not only about the money. And this is where I am really leading to, because for me, as someone pretty new to this country, who basically found out about the existence of such a concept as a land grant universities, land grant institutions. To me, this is a very unique and interesting concept of federal government giving back land into the states in an effort of putting together accessible education, not only for the students, but also for the residents. Education is not as a formal education, it's a knowledge, access to knowledge, access to information, access to resources. And in my mind, in my view, that is a very unique and very interesting way of basically providing for the community. And this is where the university extension has been such a unique and a very interesting organization. Basically, what we're seeing is extension agents present in every county of the state. Extension agents that is local and well positioned within the county to truly understand what the needs of that particular community are. And the needs of each community throughout the state are tremendously different. And this is when this specialist is capable and is able to bring in knowledge, and in many times right now is obviously tying with the state funding and additional, whether that corporate or additional private funding, or various sources of funding for the initiatives that he or she is able to implement for that community specifically. So how does that remind me of 189 countries with people like you, Leah, right there, right understanding what the situation is and able to address those needs, and basically going with the circumstance that circumstance of consequences and the risks and opportunities that particular location presents. Again, I'm definitely extremely honored and extremely touched by the fact that Yulia is here, talking to me, talking to all of us from Ukraine at the time of such a big stress. And but the work of development, the work of providing information sources and knowledge to the people goes on. It continues. So do you have any comments, Yulia, before I proceed? Mute. We cannot hear you for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? All right. Oh, that's interesting question.
Yeah, you're cutting. See if you can maybe perhaps.
I like
Yulia, perhaps turn off the video, perhaps.
It is
okay, this moment the connectivity is.
in nature. Someone who
Okay, we're losing you, Yulia. Try.
knows that the world. World Bank does every day, which is willing to discuss ways to address the question. Okay, I'll try to connect. To reconnect again or something. Can you hear me now?
Yes, this is much better now.
Okay. Yeah, the video has been stopped. So, Sonia, please let me know. Should we proceed with the presentation, or I could answer the interesting question from Catherine.
Oh, sure, absolutely, absolutely. Please do.
All right. That's a very good point, actually. Especially when we're speaking about, there is in a way, there is a sort of the development countries, and the idea is that who is putting the name of what is developed country, what is the the level of development, and where the what is the metrics, right, of the development. In a way, there is the possibility to consider it that the World Bank is looking at the world in terms of different metrics. One of this is definitely access to the health, access to education, access to, I don't know, the regular means, something like water, something like resources, something that could be considered as level of living. The level is supposed to be at several the point on the several locations, including the health, including the education level, including how the country access the development goals in terms of climate, And this is also the question of discussion, whether, for example, we can see that US is combating climate, when is it really, right now we are all on the agenda for us is to combat the climate change. And at the big discussion and the international symposium as well, we have that a lot of so-called developed countries are not pursuing the agenda strong enough for themselves, while they're pressing the climate agenda on the other countries. There is also this rhetorics. So speaking about the wealth, the old wealth versus what is it again? What is the resources are all about? This is the discussion. This is still, very lots of discussions are being made, and even even in Ukraine, even the countries of the post-Soviet history, the attitude towards the World Bank or the International Finance Corporation, IMF, is it's not 100% white, because there is a history behind it, right? The question right now, which is we consider the most progressive one, is that the wealth itself consists of different parts, and the major part is the access to the, I would say, knowledge pool, and the ability for the country to create wealth in itself, and whether it's able to create this wealth, to create this new market. This is the major, I would say, the milestone to say that yes, this country has been on the right track, and right now that there is no needed, there is nothing to be needed to be that the country can develop more by itself without some other helpers such as international organizations. So the idea of how the country or even the region can create and recreate the new market for themselves to allow them to grow, this is the main question. So there is also sometimes the discussion then the Europe, including the Western Europe, doesn't need to have the presence of their World Bank, because these are the countries that could be already considered pretty middle size. However, there is not yet enough level of creating the new market, creating the wealth of itself. So right now we have the situation when in the Eastern Europe, there is still the presence of the World Bank as well. So, and when there will be enough wealth created, we can see that we can hopefully be I would say the countries that are major donors for the World Bank, that provide knowledge and money as well to the other countries, especially the countries in Africa, in the East Asia, and others like that. So let's proceed, because
yeah, and that's basically a perfect transition here, because as you said exactly, that would be very unusual, at least from a position of someone outside of United States of America, for example, to think of World Bank being present in America, of trying to address certain shortcomings, certain problems. We can't think about that, that it's just like, yeah, well, this is the country that basically founded it all, and it's developed. Why do that? In that sense, I do see the extension office of the university is being that arm that is really addressing issues that do exist throughout, let's say, throughout the state. We do see some food security issues, access to healthy foods that are actually sustainability, droughts that are happening, climate, development of youth, and very, very many other questions that a developed country has as well. And this is where, as you said, knowledge pool, access to information, that's, we say knowledge is power. And that is true exactly in this sense. And this is where I do see CSU Extension as being that extremely strong and extremely valuable resource and source of that exactly, providing that exact information. And then, money comes in as a substantiating factor, not as a goal in itself. This is how I'm viewing this. Mm-hmm.
And let me also add one more thought. Then, basically speaking about colonial things, in a way, it's an exploitation, right? Exploitation of resources and of whatever resources, could be human resources, labor resources, natural resources. And the idea of this was the colonialism all about, right? And the sort of the good activities that kind of do the reverse thing. So there's no labor exploitation, but labor kind of knowledge, experience transfer, knowledge transfer, and in the way so the country can develop their own natural resources in the right way.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Yulia. And you can see on the screen
discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see on the screen here, I do show all of these areas of sustainable development goals. It's so-called Agenda 2030 that is basically put in place after the Millennium Development Goals have expired in 2015. And we do see things that are relevant to all of us, talking about affordable clean energy and climate action and oceans and waters and education and health, especially health, as we all know for the past 2 years. So this is a development in a much broader sense. Now, a very interesting thought that came into play is there are several very known and respected development specialists throughout the world, and they're asking, we are relying on organizations, institutions that were developed 100 years ago that are using the tools that were developed in the 20th century, and the questions and the issues that we are addressing right now are unique to the 21st century challenges. So how do we do this? How do we basically transform development as it is? And this is the big question that the world of development has been grappling for the past, I don't know, maybe 20 years, I'd say, yeah. And these are the shifts that we're starting to see, and this is what I wanted to definitely bring up. One of the key things is going local, and this is where I find, again, I'm being an advocate for the extension office here, and Yulia can translate into the larger picture of the worldwide. We're talking about a local presence, local empowerment. How the development has been done in the past years, in the 20th century, I'd call it, is a pool of knowledge, pool of experts that, for the most part, as we've seen, let's say with the World Bank, they are located in Washington, D.C. These are the specialists in certain areas, and then they are being parachuted onto the rest of the world to solve a particular problem. And even though they are the leaders in thought, applying that without a true knowledge and understanding of the local environment, local specifics, and tying with local, with the people that live there, it has not brought in a lot of success. It's a very, very short-term strategy that basically we'd even call it a somewhat paternalistic. We know how to do it, and this is how it's done. Do it. The results of it are usually extremely short-lived and have very many unintended consequences. as a result, and we can talk about that. However, let me go back very quickly to the Extension Office. This is what we do. This is what we see. We do see locals. We do see people that do live in those regions and are tied with the counties that basically are able to drive the agenda, drive the projects that that are being implemented and programs that have been implemented in those specific counties. I see the questions here on the list of experts for the, how do we get a faculty on the list of experts for the World Bank Group? Yulia, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we can. What kind of list of experts? What kind of expertise would you like to have? You know, it actually pretty much open. You know, the list of experts for each country is really to be, you know, easily to find, and there is also the such notion as the global experts, as we call it. So. The faculty of the university, right? So you would like to be able to join the experts with the World Bank, right? So the question is,
yes,
how?
Yeah, yes. Basically, this is it's actually a very interesting question, and Sarah perhaps can chime in here, because one of the key things that I definitely saw when I came back from Ukraine is at least in my own personal eyes, what I definitely what I saw was a strength of the university in its agricultural knowledge and sector, and I'd say it's one of the it's very advanced and has a lot to offer to the rest of the world. And this is where I did have this vision of connecting the university faculty experts with questions and problem issues that do exist in, for example, in Ukraine, a very fertile country with a fertile land and, you know, huge agricultural potential. So these are the areas where perhaps more of a putting the university itself on the list of basically on a agenda and on the list of global experts in this particular subjects would definitely be extremely helpful. That's my personal view on that.
Probably, yeah, I understood, Sonia. Probably the idea is, if we're speaking about coordination between the university and the World Bank, there is a whole structure called an education, because in a way the idea of World Bank, besides money, is the knowledge pool and knowledge sharing. Therefore, the question of education and maybe this horizontal ties and lines of education, for instance, in agri sector, could be also be explored. It's possible.
Yeah, the horizontal ties are extremely important, and I think this is our future as to how we're going to, you know, be able to do this, is developing the educational and professional ties with the specific regions. Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's all, again, we're going local, first local, and then moving up to the global. Let's see, the other big element of development and sustainable development to that is, again, we did start talking about this, that it's not all about the money. And I wanted to talk about this triple bottom line approach that was developed actually for the new approach to corporations, to business, and where it's not just about the bottom line, but let's talk about the resources, the people. Let's talk about sustainability in terms of our climate and the planet, and the profit is only as a element to this overall development. In my view, this is also very applicable to the development, where we do want to talk about social. And actually, this is what we do see, even with the World Bank. We do see that, I'd say, Yulia, correct me, none of the investment, none happen just for the investment itself. They always have specific ties to a particular agenda. Very often, this is environmental, making sure that when you're developing, let's say, I don't know, the sugar beet industry, for example, that runoff are not going and polluting the waters, or the social aspects, making sure that, and we'll talk about a little bit later, banking, for example, they're developing certain specific programs that allow women-owned enterprises be assessed in such a way that they can actually get access to monies, and there's certain issues that associated with that. Corporate governance is a very big aspect, and very, very many others that each investment basically monitors and makes sure that there are other results associated with that talk about the social and environmental outcomes.
Yeah, and if I just throw a couple of things, there is a number of we called it, even we have different names for it, but in an essence, it's the themes and topics, and it's agriculture, it's education, it's energy, it's all kinds of climate change. Of course, climate change is huge on the agenda. Conflict, fragility, gender, infrastructure, and overall, and again, this is all what we call the cross-cutting. So, for each of the development theme, for instance, project. Okay, let's talk, for example, agriculture project on creating the insurance products for the farmers in Brasilia and in Ukraine, for instance. Our Ukrainian farmers went to Brazil associations and learn how to implement this the new insurance products, for instance. And on this project, there should be at least several cross-cutting solutions that enable the climate change, that, for instance, enable the women empowerment in many regions. So Ukraine is not one of them, but anyway, in the other regions, it's a big problem that women cannot actually enter the job market, for instance. The knowledge transfer idea is also one of the major things to be, this cross-cutting solutions. So speaking about the social impact, every project should have a social impact in that. So this is not the idea of just giving the money, an investment, providing aid, but the idea is to have this social impact, which is very strictly measured. This is to add more on this slide.
Thank you so much, Yulia. And if you can take a moment to talk about the project that you're implementing in Ukraine right now. Again, because Yulia is right now out of Kiev and in the western part of Ukraine, the connection is bad, and we couldn't stream the video about the project that we wanted to show all of you. But perhaps you can take a couple of minutes just to talk a little bit about that, and that definitely talks and highlights the example of where developing of the market and a social agenda first before bringing in actual financing. This is kind of the area of work that the World Bank Group is doing.
All right. Okay, so this is just, okay, let me illustrate that in words. Perhaps it would be as an audio book, something like that. If you ever seen the movies about the Soviet Union, you probably would remember there are lots of multi-family buildings, and usually there is like a filter is like gray, and it's usually winter, something like February, and everybody's cold and shivering. So this is the pretty much the kind of the regular cinematic vision of the urban life in eastern part of Europe. Of course, it's exaggeration. However, there is also some truth in that as well. For instance, in Ukraine, we have about 180,000 of multifamily buildings. And overall, in Europe, in Eastern Europe, there was the biggest housing project in the 60s and 70s, biggest in the world, actually. Whereas the idea was to build a lot of houses, of homes, basically, to provide people with shelter, with good living. And but there was only one thing. At that time, the energy was extremely cheap. So the heating was not a problem because the gas price was absolutely on the COPEX level. What happened after the Soviet Union fell? Actually the market relations started to play, and the price for energy grew up in many times. The homes, the houses, whereas the 60% of the population lives, actually it's urban population, quite urban. The houses became very inefficient. So you receive the utility bill, which is extremely high, and you cannot do anything about it. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the idea is, when you had the Soviet Union, you were basically renting the flat from the state. So it's a little bit different approach when you are just a rentee and the state takes care of the house and everything that is around the house. After the market economy started in 90s, people, about 90% of population of the buildings are owned by people. This is different from the other countries in Europe, for instance, and maybe in the US, where in Europe there is only 30 or 40% of people who own their flats. Yeah, we'll close it up soon. 5 minutes, they say. So the idea is how you can reverse the situation. And then the World Bank came, and they see it. Okay, so you have huge loss of energy, huge loss of money. Basically, the heat goes in the air. People are getting poor. There is like called energy poverty. There is idea of, and people do not have the mechanism how to make a decision on their own building, because there is none, because there is no such mechanism. There is no legal mechanisms. So the first thing that the project did is to create the legal mechanism to address, so the people could make decisions, joint decisions on their building, and actually stipulated the creation of the homeowners associations, and this became the client. So the idea is to create the market where you have the client who can make decisions. After that, it was to talk to the commercial institutions, banks, and other financial institutions, so they will provide means, loans to the people, to these clients, so they could modernize and save on energy. In a way, when the whole this different steps were made, first is the legal, the second is financial, and third is to change the behavior, to say that you are the owner now, you are responsible, you have to take the action, you have to modernize. So this chain reaction started, and it allowed people to modernize over 10,000 right now.
Yeah, of buildings.
Building.
Yeah, this is and go ahead. You're cutting out a little bit, Yulia, but yes, thank you for this overview. And definitely, this is something that one of the big lessons that we had learned there is that changes like this, very difficult behavioral, economical, social changes, take time, and we've actually been doing it since I think 2008 or 2009. So it's already been close to 15 years, and it's still going. So changes like this do take time, and people like Yulia and others on the ground are the one that are making this change. And this is where we wanted to really maybe just kind of sum up, as we have got just a few minutes left, is that local empowerment is a key to the new development agenda that we want to be able to see. And you know, as again, we're seeing this, I'm seeing this right here with our own university. It's a bottom up. It's you taking the society and understanding what their needs are and empowering the society to be making the changes. It's any type of project, any type of funding that has a social impact associated with it that is that makes sense and is effective. It's talking about removing silos of just implementing a particular project vis-a-vis a broader program, vis-a-vis giving larger empowerment again to local regions to implement their own programs of their own choosing, and focusing not on the outputs as to, you know, how many activities you've done, but on the larger impact. And that requires more bravery of the funders to basically relax that control and allow the local specialists actually, you know, be in charge. And it's all about accessibility of technology and data. And, you know, we can talk about more about that, but I see Sarah is already on the line. I think there's time.
Yes, let me also add in terms of distance, you know, that you say that there is local empowerment versus parachuting. There is, there could be a comparison, a little comparison when you speak about learning process, right? There is a so-called distance of learning. Yeah, you can give, you know, somebody a textbook and just say, go on and learn it by yourself. But there is such sort of the distance that the teacher, there is somebody who knows what is it not to know and how to get the people, the projects, you know, from the point zero to the point where it should go. So this is this distance when you have local presence, when you have local experts that know this difference, this distance, and the end point that, you know, this project should be. You know, what is the aim of the projects and what is the path of the projects, you know, how to do it. So I would like to also to connect with Sonia on this exactly the point. You know, so this is the local understanding versus the, you know, global expertise. So the local right now is much of the, I would say the value of local is even bigger now, and it will be bigger even more.
What an interesting and lovely conversation we've been having. I think we could talk for another hour easily. So I'm sad to be the one to come on the screen to say that our time has come to an end today with this incredible session. Thank you so much to Sonia Lynn and to Yulia for joining us from the Ukraine. I learned a lot and really enjoyed the session. Thank you everyone attending this session. I'm sure you all are just as engaged as I am. Did you want to wrap up with anything else, Sonia Lynn, before I give you?
I just see very quickly, I just see a question from Veronica talking about actual specifics of the projects. And I think, Veronica, we can perhaps connect, we can connect offline, talk about the specific measurements and specific results of the program, because you're absolutely right. To just basically say, yes, you know, we've been successful and did this in terms of the volume. It's very difficult, but we can talk a little bit about the fundamental changes that took place that are seeing the changes that are going to ensure with that.
So like I said, sadly, I have to end our session. Our next session is called Let's Build a Chair with Jonathan Carlian, and that will be starting at 10 a.m. We also have an incredible keynote speaker today at 1 p.m. Lulu Garcia Navarro. So I hope to see some of you all there. And the conversation doesn't have to end now. So let's hopefully connect offline and continue to have these conversations. And hopefully in the future, we can have a session like this in person. So thank you again to all of our attendees, to our presenters. We wish you all well, and hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Thank you so much.